Robert Chen had been a detective for 26 years. He'd seen it all. Drug busts, fraud cases, even a couple of murders that still gave him nightmares. But now, at 53, he was ready for something quieter. His kids were off at college. His wife had passed away 3 years ago, and the 4-bedroom house just felt too big and too empty. Every room echoed with memories that were beautiful but painful. So when a young couple offered him $40,000 over asking price, Robert didn't think twice. They were expecting twins and loved the backyard. Perfect. He'd take the money, buy a small condo near the beach, and maybe finally learn to fish like he'd always promised himself. That was the plan anyway. Until the letter arrived. It came in a thick manila envelope, certified mail, signature required. Robert signed for it on a Tuesday morning, still in his pajamas with his coffee getting cold on the kitchen counter. He figured it was something about the sale, maybe more paperwork from the title company. Instead, he pulled out a 6-page document printed on fancy letterhead that read, Meadowbrook Community HOA, with a little logo of a house and a tree. The first line made him blink twice. Dear Mr. Chen, it has come to our attention that your property located at 847 Willow Drive is currently in violation of multiple community standards. Robert looked out his window at his front yard. Multiple violations? He'd mowed the lawn on Saturday. His house was painted a normal beige color that matched half the neighborhood. What violations? He kept reading. The letter was signed by Linda Prescott, HOA president, and boy did Linda have opinions. According to her detailed list, Robert's mailbox was non-regulation black instead of approved bronze. His driveway had unsightly oil stains that detract from community aesthetics. His front window had curtains that were not on the approved list of window treatments. There was even a complaint that his house numbers were 1/2 inch too large per community. Guidelines, Robert counted them. 47 violations in total. 47. He'd lived in this house for 15 years and never heard a single complaint. Sure, he got the annual HOA newsletter about the holiday party and the occasional reminder to trim trees. But nothing like this. And conveniently, all these violations were suddenly urgent now, right when he was trying to sell. His detective brain started working. This felt wrong. Really wrong. The letter ended with a friendly threat wrapped in bureaucratic language. Until all violations are remedied to board satisfaction, we cannot approve any property transfers. Please schedule a consultation with the HOA board within 7 business days. Robert grabbed his phone and called his real estate agent, Michelle. She'd been selling houses in this neighborhood for 12 years. Michelle, did you know the HOA had to approve sales? Well, technically yes, but Robert, it's usually just a formality. They check that your dues are paid and that's it. I've never seen them actually block a sale. What's going on? Robert read her the list. By violation number 12, Michelle was interrupting. Wait, your curtains? Robert, I was just at your house on Friday. You have white curtains. Everyone has white curtains. This is insane. That's what I thought. Let me make some calls. Don't worry about it yet. This is probably just some overzealous board member who doesn't understand how this works. But Robert was already worrying. Not because he couldn't fix a mailbox or pressure wash his driveway. He was worrying because in 26 years of police work, he'd learned to trust his gut. And his gut was screaming that something shady was happening. The next day, Robert decided to meet this Linda Prescott in person. He looked up her address in the HOA directory. She lived 4 streets over in one of the bigger houses, the kind with the 3-car garage and professionally landscaped yard that probably cost more to maintain than Robert's monthly salary. He rang the doorbell at 10 in the morning, dressed casually but neat. The door opened to reveal a woman in her late 50s with stiff blonde hair and the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. She wore a white pantsuit that looked expensive and held a tablet like it was a weapon. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Hi, I'm Robert Chen from Willow Drive. I got your letter about the violations and I was hoping we could talk about it." Her smile got tighter. "Oh yes, Mr. Chen, the problem property. I was wondering when you'd show up." Problem property. Robert kept his face neutral, but inside he was taking notes. This woman had already decided who he was before they'd even met. Linda didn't invite him in. Instead, she stepped outside and started walking toward her car. "Come on, we'll do a site visit. You need to see these issues through the board's eyes." They drove separately to his house. Robert watched in his rearview mirror as Linda tailgated him the whole way. Her face pinched with what looked like permanent disapproval. At his house, Linda pulled out a measuring tape, a clipboard, and her tablet. She walked his property like a general inspecting troops, shaking her head and making disappointed clicking sounds with her tongue. "See this?" She pointed at his mailbox, which Robert had installed himself 10 years ago. "Black is not approved. Bronze only. It's in the bylaws, page 47, subsection C. I've had this mailbox for a decade," Robert said calmly. "And it's been wrong for a decade." Linda made a note on her tablet. "These things add up, Mr. Chen. One person thinks they can have a black mailbox, next thing you know someone wants pink flamingos. We have standards for a reason." She moved to his driveway. "And these stains. Unacceptable. This brings down property values for the entire community." Robert looked at the tiny spots she was pointing to. "You had to practically get on your hands and knees to see them. Linda, those are barely visible. I can pressure wash them if it's that important, but it is that important." She cut him off. "Property values, Mr. Chen. When you let one house go downhill, it affects everyone. Surely as a detective you understand the broken windows theory." There it was. She knew what he did for a living. That was interesting. Robert hadn't mentioned his job. For the next 40 minutes, Linda found fault with everything. His lawn had 3 dandelions. His house paint, which was literally the same color as 12 other houses on the street, was apparently faded and unprofessional looking. The small crack in his driveway was a safety hazard and aesthetic nightmare. She even complained that his garden hose was visible from the street. "How long will it take to fix all this?" Robert asked, keeping his voice level. Linda pretended to calculate. "Oh, with contractors and approval processes, 4 months, maybe 5. And of course each repair has to be inspected and approved by the board before we can move to the next item. We meet once a month. I have a buyer who wants to close in 6 weeks. Well," Linda's smile was sharp now, "that's going to be a problem, isn't it? Of course, if you want to work with us, we can be flexible. I know some contractors who could prioritize your repairs. My husband actually runs a property services company. Very reasonable rates, and there it was. The angle. Robert's instincts had been right. "Let me think about it," Robert said. Linda handed him her business card. "Don't think too long, Mr. Chen. Those daily fines start accumulating after the 7-day warning period. $200 per day adds up fast. But really, we're just trying to maintain community standards. I'm sure you understand." As Linda drove away, Robert stood in his driveway and looked at his perfectly normal house. 15 years, no complaints. Now suddenly he was public enemy number 1. And Linda just happened to have a husband with a property services company ready to help. Robert pulled out his phone and started making calls. First to Michelle, his real estate agent. Then to his buddy Dave in the fraud division. And then to the county clerk's office to pull some HOA records. If Linda Prescott wanted to play games, she'd picked the wrong person. Robert had spent his entire career investigating people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. This was going to be interesting. Robert spent the rest of that Tuesday afternoon doing what he'd done for over 2 decades, investigating. He started with the basics, pulling up the HOA records online. Public documents were easy enough to access if you knew where to look, and Robert definitely knew where to look. The Meadowbrook Community HOA had been around for 18 years. Standard stuff mostly. Monthly dues, rules about lawn maintenance, quiet hours after 10 p.m. But when Robert started digging into the board meeting minutes from the past 3 years, a pattern emerged. And it wasn't pretty. Linda Prescott had become HOA president 4 years ago. Before that, the meeting minutes were boring. Someone complained about a barking dog. Someone else wanted better street lighting, normal neighborhood stuff. But after Linda took over, things changed. Robert made a list. In the past 3 years, Linda had filed formal violation complaints against 17 different properties. 17. That seemed like a lot for a neighborhood of only 200 homes. But what really caught his attention was the timing. He cross-referenced the violation notices with public property records from the county assessor's office. 12 of those 17 properties had been listed for sale when the violations were filed. 12 out of 17. That wasn't a coincidence. Robert leaned back in his office chair and rubbed his eyes. Okay, so Linda had a pattern of harassing people who were trying to sell. But why? What was the endgame? He kept digging. 6 of those 12 properties never actually sold to their original buyers. The deals fell through. Robert knew from his own experience with Michelle that buyers got nervous when there were complications. HOA disputes, title issues. Most people would just walk away and find an easier house to buy. So what happened to those 6 properties after the sales fell through? Robert pulled up the detailed property records. It took him an hour of cross-referencing, but eventually he found it. 4 of those 6 properties were eventually sold to a company called Prescott Property Solutions, LLC. The other 2 had been bought by something called Mountain View Investments Group. Prescott Property Solutions Prescott, like Linda Prescott. Robert's pulse quickened. He ran a corporate registry search. Prescott Property Solutions, LLC was registered to one Ronald Prescott, Linda's husband. Robert had seen the family photo on her mantle during their brief encounter at her doorstep. Big guy, too much hair gel, expensive watch. The Mountain View Investments Group took a bit more digging, but eventually Robert found the ownership papers filed with the state. 3 owners. One of them was Ronald Prescott. The other 2 were Linda's brother and sister-in-law. Got you, Robert muttered to himself. But he needed more than patterns. He needed proof, and more importantly, he needed to talk to the other victims. If this was what he thought it was, other homeowners had been through exactly what he was going through right now. Robert started with the most recent case before his own. A property on Elm Street had been listed 8 months ago. According to the records, the HOA had filed violations. The original sale fell through, and Prescott Property Solutions bought it 3 months later. The previous owners were listed as Theodore and June Walsh. He found a phone number through a people search website. Theodore Walsh answered on the 3rd ring, his voice cautious. Hello? Hi, Mr. Walsh, my name is Robert Chen. I live in Meadowbrook, and I'm dealing with some HOA issues. I found your name in the property records and wondered if I could ask you a few questions about your experience selling your house. There was a long pause. Are you dealing with Linda Prescott? I am. Theodore let out a bitter laugh. Then buckle up, friend. That woman is a nightmare wrapped in a pantsuit. For the next 40 minutes, Theodore told Robert everything. He and June had decided to downsize after he retired. They'd found a buyer, a nice family with 2 kids. Everything was going smoothly until Linda showed up with her clipboard and her list of violations. She claimed our fence was 6 inches too tall, Theodore said. 6 inches. We'd had that fence for 12 years. Then it was the color of our shutters, the type of flowers in our garden, the material of our porch furniture. It never ended. Every time we fixed something, she found 3 more problems. How long did this go on? 4 months. Our buyers got tired of waiting and bought another house. We were devastated. We'd already made an offer on a condo in Florida. We were going to lose that too if we didn't sell fast. And then Linda's husband showed up, like a vulture. He offered us $60,000 below our asking price. Said it was generous considering all the work the house needed. We didn't want to take it, but we were desperate. We had to move to Florida to be near June's sister who had gotten sick. We couldn't wait anymore. Robert felt anger building in his chest. Did you ever consider reporting her? To who? She's the HOA president. We looked into lawyers, but they wanted $5,000 just to start fighting it. We couldn't afford that and the move and everything else. So we took the lowball offer and got out. I still feel sick about it. Robert thanked Theodore and promised to keep him updated. Then he called 3 more people from his list. The stories were almost identical. Violations out of nowhere. Sales falling through. Linda's husband swooping in with cash offers well below market value. One woman, Patricia Huang, actually started crying on the phone. We lost $40,000 on that house. $40,000. That was our retirement money. But what could we do? Linda had the whole HOA board backing her up, and our buyer walked away. Her husband was the only one willing to buy. We felt completely trapped. By Wednesday evening, Robert had talked to 7 different families. All of them had the same story. All of them had been bullied, manipulated, and financially damaged by Linda Prescott's scheme. Robert's buddy Dave from the fraud division stopped by that night with a 6-pack of beer. Dave was in his early 40s, built like a linebacker, and had worked with Robert on dozens of cases over the years. So let me get this straight, Dave said, popping open a beer and settling into Robert's couch. This HOA lady is using her position to tank property sales. Then her husband buys the houses cheap and flips them for profit. That's exactly what she's doing. I've got 7 confirmed cases, maybe more if I keep looking. Dave whistled low. That's fraud. Extortion too, probably. You got hard evidence? I've got patterns, testimonies, public records showing the property transfers. What I don't have yet is direct communication between Linda and her husband, proving they're coordinating this. No smoking gun. You need emails, texts, something showing they planned this together. Robert nodded. He'd been thinking the same thing. I'm working on it. But Dave, these people lost their life savings. One couple had to pull their kid out of college because they needed the money. Another guy had a heart attack from the stress. This isn't just fraud. Linda's destroying lives. So what's your next move? I need to see the HOA's financial records. Linda's required to keep books and make them available to homeowners. I'm going to request them tomorrow. I want to see if there's any money changing hands between the HOA and her husband's company. Dave grinned. Look at you, still working cases even when you're supposed to be retiring. Can't help it. Once a detective, always a detective. Plus, this is personal now. She tried to scam the wrong guy. Thursday morning, Robert sent a formal email to Linda requesting access to all HOA financial records for the past 4 years. Under state law, she had to provide them within 10 business days. He also requested copies of all violation notices filed during her presidency, along with the criteria used to determine violations. Linda's response came back within an hour. Mr. Chen, your request will be processed according to standard protocols. However, I must remind you that your property remains in violation status. I've scheduled a formal hearing for next Thursday to determine your fines. You should also know that I've been made aware of your phone calls to former community members. Harassment will not be tolerated. So she knew he'd been talking to people. That meant she was worried. Good. Robert forwarded the email to Dave with a simple message. She's rattled. Dave texted back. Keep pushing. Rattled people make mistakes. That afternoon, Robert got another letter. This time it was from Linda's attorney, a guy named Brent Kozlowski with an office in a strip mall next to a nail salon. The letter threatened Robert with legal action if he continued to harass and defame Linda Prescott. It also reminded him that his daily fines would start Monday, $200 per day until all violations were resolved. Robert smiled. Empty threats from a strip mall lawyer didn't scare him. What did interest him was the fact that Linda felt threatened enough to send the letter at all. That meant his investigation was working. Friday morning, Robert got a call from Michelle, his real estate agent. Robert, I just got a call from your buyers. They're getting nervous about all this HOA stuff. They've heard there might be legal issues. Linda contacted them. She called them yesterday and told them the property had significant compliance issues and that the sale might not be approved. Robert, they're talking about backing out. Robert felt his jaw tighten. Linda was escalating. But so was he. Michelle, tell them to hold on for 2 more weeks. I promise this is going to work out. After he hung up, Robert sat at his desk and looked at the growing file of evidence he'd compiled. Property records, testimonies, financial trails, emails. Linda thought she was untouchable. She thought being HOA president gave her power. But Robert had been taking down people who thought they were untouchable for his entire career. Linda Prescott was about to learn a very important lesson about who she'd decided to mess with. The weekend brought more problems. Saturday morning, Robert found a bright orange sticker plastered on his front door. Notice of violation in huge letters visible from the street. Linda was trying to embarrass him, make him look like a problem neighbor. Robert peeled it off and added it to his evidence file. Then Sunday afternoon, his doorbell rang. It was his neighbor from 2 houses down, an elderly man named George who'd lived in the neighborhood since it was built. Robert, I hope you don't mind me stopping by, George said, looking uncomfortable. Linda called me yesterday. She's asking neighbors to sign a petition saying your property is bringing down the neighborhood. She wants to use it at the hearing. Did you sign it? Hell no. I told her where she could stick her petition. Your house looks fine. Better than fine, actually. I don't know what her problem is. George shook his head. But she's going door to door. I thought you should know. She's got a few people scared enough to sign. The Hendersons, the Lums, couple others. They're afraid if they don't play along, she'll come after them next. Robert felt a flash of anger but pushed it down. Thanks for telling me, George. And thanks for not signing. Listen, between you and me, Linda's been a problem since she took over that HOA. My property taxes went up last year, so I called to ask if we could use some HOA money to fix the streetlights. You know what she told me? That the funds were allocated elsewhere, and I should be grateful the community was so well managed. Meanwhile, half the streetlights on our block don't work. After George left, Robert pulled out the HOA financial records that Linda had finally, reluctantly provided. She'd sent them Friday afternoon, probably hoping he wouldn't have time to go through them before the Thursday hearing. But Robert had nothing but time. He spread the documents across his dining room table and got to work. This was the boring part of detective work that nobody saw on TV shows. Hours of reading spreadsheets looking for patterns, finding the one number that didn't add up. And boy, did Linda have numbers that didn't add up. The HOA collected about $80,000 a year in dues from the 200 homes in the neighborhood. That money was supposed to go toward common area maintenance, landscaping, street repairs, insurance, that kind of thing. But Robert found some interesting expenses in Linda's ledger's $20,000 to Prescott Property Solutions LLC for consulting services, $15,000 to Mountain View Investments Group for community assessment and planning, another $8,000 to something called LP Enterprises for administrative support. Robert ran a corporate search on LP Enterprises. The owner was listed as Linda Jane Prescott. She was funneling HOA money into her own companies. The money that neighbors paid to maintain the community was going straight into Linda and her husband's pockets. Robert did the math. Over the past 3 years, Linda had diverted almost $90,000 from the HOA into businesses she and her husband controlled. That was on top of the money they made buying properties cheap and reselling them. This wasn't just fraud anymore. This was embezzlement. This was organized theft from an entire community. Monday morning, Robert drove to the county clerk's office. He needed copies of all property transfers involving Prescott Property Solutions and Mountain View Investments. Official copies with stamps and seals, the kind that would hold up in court. The clerk, a tired-looking woman named Rita, pulled the files. "You investigating something?" she asked, glancing at the stack of papers. "Something like that. Thought so. You've got that cop look. My ex-husband was police," she stamped the documents. "Whatever you're working on, I hope you get them. People think they can get away with anything these days." Robert smiled. "They usually do, until they don't." Tuesday afternoon, Robert met Dave at a coffee shop far enough from the neighborhood that they wouldn't run into anyone. Dave brought a colleague from the State Real Estate Commission, a sharp woman named Vanessa who looked like she didn't tolerate nonsense. Robert laid out everything he'd found. The property transfers, the testimonies from victims, the HOA financial records showing embezzlement, the pattern of violations only targeting people trying to sell. Vanessa studied the documents, her expression getting darker by the page. "This is textbook fraud. Real estate fraud, HOA fraud, embezzlement, possibly extortion." She looked up at Robert. "You've built a solid case here. How'd you pull all this together so fast?" 26 years of practice. "Well, it shows. We can definitely open an investigation. The Real Estate Commission takes this stuff seriously. If we can prove the Prescotts used their HOA position to manipulate property sales for personal profit, they'll lose their business license at minimum. Criminal charges are likely. How long does an investigation take?" Vanessa grimaced. "Usually 6 months, maybe more. These things take time, and I don't have 6 months. My sale is supposed to close in 4 weeks, and my buyers are getting cold feet. Linda's hearing is Thursday, and she's planning to fine me $200 a day. She's going to bleed me until I either give up or sell to her husband at a massive loss." Dave leaned forward. "What if we speed things up? Apply some pressure?" Vanessa considered this. "We could do a preliminary inquiry. Interview the victims, request documents, make it official. That might rattle them enough to back off while we build the full case." "Do it," Robert said. "And I've got another idea." Wednesday afternoon, Robert sent an email to every homeowner in the Meadowbrook Community HOA, all 200 of them. The subject line read, "Important information about your HOA finances." In the email, he laid out the facts carefully. No accusations, just facts. He attached copies of the financial records showing money going to companies owned by Linda and Ronald Prescott. He included a breakdown of what those payments were supposed to be for versus what was actually delivered. He pointed out that the neighborhood's common areas hadn't seen improvements in 3 years, despite consistent dues collection. He ended with a simple statement. "As homeowners, you have the right to question how your dues are being spent. I encourage you to attend Thursday's hearing and ask questions. He hit send and waited. The response was immediate. His inbox exploded. Some neighbors were angry at him for causing drama, but most were shocked. People started asking questions. Why was the HOA paying consulting fees to the president's husband? What community assessment was worth $15,000? Why hadn't they been told about these expenses? By Wednesday evening, Linda was receiving so many calls and emails that she sent out her own message. It was defensive, claiming that all expenses were properly authorized and that Robert was conducting a smear campaign because he didn't want to follow community rules. But the damage was done. People were paying attention now. Thursday morning arrived. The hearing was scheduled for 7 p.m. at the community center, a small building near the neighborhood entrance usually used for birthday parties and meetings. Robert showed up at 6:45. The parking lot was packed. Robert had expected maybe 10 or 15 people. There had to be at least 80 cars here. Word had spread. Inside, Linda sat at a table at the front of the room with 4 other board members. She looked composed, but Robert could see the tension around her eyes. Her husband Ronald sat in the front row, a thick-necked man with slicked-back hair and a suit that probably cost more than Robert's monthly mortgage payment. The room buzzed with conversation. Robert recognized some of the people he'd talked to on the phone. Theodore Walsh gave him a subtle nod from the back row. Patricia Huang was there too, arms crossed, looking determined. At 7 sharp, Linda called the meeting to order. Her voice was crisp and professional, but Robert could hear the strain underneath. We're here tonight to address the violations at 847 Willow Drive, owned by Robert Chen, Linda began. Mr. Chen has repeatedly refused to bring his property into compliance with community standards, and the board has determined that fines are necessary. Robert raised his hand. I'd like to speak. Linda's smile was ice cold. You'll have your turn, Mr. Chen. First, I'd like to present the board's findings. For the next 10 minutes, Linda went through her list of violations with photos. Robert had to admit she was thorough. She'd photographed every tiny flaw she could find. The crack in his driveway looked huge blown up on the projector screen. The oil spots looked like environmental disasters, but then something unexpected happened. George, Robert's neighbor, stood up. Linda, I've got a question. How much did the HOA pay for this presentation? Because I've got the same crack in my driveway and nobody's ever said a word about it. Linda's smile faltered. That's not relevant to... Another neighbor stood. A younger guy Robert recognized from the neighborhood barbecues. I want to know about the consulting fees. What exactly did your husband's company consult on? Then another voice. And another. The room erupted with questions. People wanted to know about the money, about the other properties, about why violations only seemed to happen when someone was trying to sell. Linda tried to regain control, banging a gavel that looked ridiculous in her manicured hand. This is out of order. We're here to discuss Mr. Chen's property, not... Actually, Robert said, standing up and projecting his voice clearly across the room. I think we should discuss all of it. Because I've done some research and I think everyone here deserves to know what's really going on. Linda's face went pale, then red. Ronald stood up, pointing at Robert. You can't just make accusations without proof. Robert smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Who said anything about accusations? I'm just planning to present facts. And I've got plenty of those. The room went silent. Everyone was staring at Robert now, waiting to see what would happen next. Linda gripped her gavel so hard her knuckles went white. This was it. The moment Robert had been building toward all week. Time to show Linda Prescott that she'd messed with the wrong detective. Robert walked slowly to the front of the room. Every eye in the community center followed him. Linda looked like she wanted to bolt from her chair. But with 80 neighbors watching, she was trapped. She had to let this play out. For those who don't know me, I'm Robert Chen, he said, his voice calm and steady. I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. I'm also a detective chief with the police department. And this past week, I've been doing what I do best, investigating. He pulled out a folder from his bag and opened it. Let's start with the basics. Linda claims my property has 47 violations. I've lived here for 15 years without a single complaint. But suddenly, right when I'm trying to sell my house is a disaster, that seemed odd to me. So I started looking into whether other people had similar experiences. Robert pulled out the first document. Theodore and June Walsh. They tried to sell their house last year. Linda filed violations. Their sale fell through. Then Prescott Property Solutions, owned by Linda's husband Ronald, bought their house for $60,000 below market value. Theodore stood up in the back. It's true. Every word. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Linda tried to interrupt. That's completely irrelevant to this hearing. Patricia Huang. Robert continued, ignoring her. Same thing. Violations filed when she tried to sell. Sale fell through. Ronald's company bought the property at a steep discount. Patricia raised her hand from her seat. Lost $40,000. That was my retirement savings. The murmurs got louder. Robert saw one of the board members, an older man named Frank, lean over to whisper something to the woman sitting next to him. They both looked shocked. Over the past 3 years, Robert said, Linda has filed violation complaints against 17 properties. 12 of those were actively being sold. 6 of those sales fell through. 4 of those properties were then purchased by companies owned by Linda's husband and her family members, always at significantly below market value. Ronald stood up, his face red. You can't prove any connection. I run a legitimate business. Sit down, Ronald, Robert said, and something in his tone made the bigger man actually sit. Robert had spent decades dealing with criminals who thought they could intimidate their way out of trouble. Ronald wasn't even in his top 100. But that's not all, Robert continued. He pulled out the HOA financial records. Linda provided these to me on Friday, probably hoping I wouldn't have time to read them. I did. Let me share some interesting expenses. He held up the papers so everyone could see, even though most people were too far away to read the details. Over the past 3 years, the HOA has paid almost $90,000 to companies owned by Linda and Ronald Prescott. $20,000 for consulting services, $15,000 for community assessment and planning, $8,000 to a company that Linda owns personally called LP Enterprises for administrative support. The room erupted. People were shouting questions. Frank, the board member, stood up. Linda, is this true? We voted on the consulting fee, but you never told us it was going to your husband's company. Linda's face had gone from pale to bright red. Those were legitimate business expenses. Everything was properly documented. Really? Robert asked. Because I can't find any evidence that Prescott Property Solutions actually performed any consulting work for the HOA. No reports, no assessments, no documentation of services rendered. Just invoices and payments. That's not consulting. That's embezzlement. Another board member, a woman named Helen, looked horrified. Linda, you told us that money was for hiring an outside expert to review our community standards. You said he was from a top firm in the city. He is an expert, Linda snapped. He's your husband, Helen shot back. And you never told us that. The room was chaos now. Neighbors were standing up demanding answers. Some were angry at Linda. Others were angry at the whole board for not catching this sooner. Robert let it go for a minute. Let the reality sink in for everyone. Then he raised his hand for quiet. It took a moment, but eventually the room settled down. There's more, he said. And this is the part that's really going to interest you. He pulled out another set of documents. The HOA collects about $80,000 a year in dues. But when's the last time you saw any improvements around here? The streetlights on Oak and Maple haven't worked in 2 years. The playground equipment is rusted. The community garden was supposed to be expanded last spring. Where's that money going? George called out from his seat. I asked about the streetlights last year. Linda told me the budget was allocated elsewhere. It was, Robert said. It was allocated to Linda's bank account. He held up bank statements. These are from a Freedom of Information request I filed. They show HOA funds being transferred to the companies I mentioned, which then transferred money to personal accounts belonging to Linda and Ronald Prescott. At this point, even the board members who'd been loyal to Linda looked sick. Frank stood up and addressed the room. I had no idea about any of this. I swear to you all, if I'd known Linda was funneling money to her own companies, I would have stopped it immediately. I vote to remove her as president effective now. Seconded, Helen said quickly. You can't do that, Linda shouted. I haven't done anything wrong. This is all a witch hunt because Robert doesn't want to follow the rules. The rules, Robert said quietly, and the room went silent again. Let's talk about those rules, Linda, because I also pulled the original HOA bylaws, the ones filed when this neighborhood was founded. Nowhere in those bylaws does it specify that mailboxes must be bronze. Nowhere does it say curtains need approval. In fact, most of the violations you've cited don't appear in the actual governing documents at all. You made them up. Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Those are updated guidelines that the board approved. Show me the meeting minutes where those updates were voted on, Robert challenged. Linda couldn't, because they didn't exist. She'd been making up rules to target whoever she wanted. Just then, the back door of the community center opened. Dave walked in, and he wasn't alone. Vanessa from the State Real Estate Commission was with him, along with 2 uniformed officers and a man in a suit carrying a briefcase. "Sorry to interrupt," Dave said, walking down the center aisle, "but I think this is good timing." "Linda and Ronald Prescott? I'm Detective Dave Morrison. This is Vanessa Chen from the State Real Estate Commission, and these officers are here to assist." Linda's face went white. Ronald started to stand up, then thought better of it. Vanessa stepped forward, opening her briefcase. "Mr. and Mrs. Prescott, we've been conducting an investigation into allegations of real estate fraud, HOA embezzlement, and extortion. Based on evidence provided by Detective Chief Robert Chen and testimonies from multiple victims, we have enough to move forward with formal charges." "This is insane," Linda shrieked. "You can't just barge in here and—" "Actually, we can," Vanessa said calmly. "And we are. Your business license for Prescott Property Solutions is suspended, effective immediately pending investigation. You're both being charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement of HOA funds, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud." The room was dead silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone watched as the officers stepped forward. They weren't arresting Linda and Ronald on the spot, not yet, but they handed them official-looking documents. "These are subpoenas," Vanessa explained for the benefit of the room. "You'll both need to appear for formal questioning next week. We'll be contacting all of your business associates and reviewing every property transaction your companies have been involved in for the past 5 years. Ronald's expensive suit suddenly didn't make him look so powerful. He looked small and trapped. Linda clutched the subpoena, her hands shaking. Frank cleared his throat from the board table. "This hearing is adjourned. Linda, I'm formally asking for your resignation from the HOA board effective immediately. If you don't resign, we'll hold an emergency vote to remove you." Linda looked around the room at all the faces staring at her. Angry faces, betrayed faces. Not a single person looked sympathetic. Even the few neighbors who'd signed her petition earlier were glaring at her. "Fine," she whispered. "I resign." "Good," Frank said. "Now get out." Linda gathered her papers with shaking hands. Ronald put his hand on her back and steered her toward the door. As they walked past Robert, Linda stopped. She looked at him with pure hatred in her eyes. "This isn't over," she hissed. Robert met her gaze steadily. "Yeah, it is. You just don't realize it yet." Linda and Ronald left the community center to complete silence. Nobody said a word until the door closed behind them. Then the room exploded with conversation. People were hugging each other, congratulating Robert, demanding to know what happened next. Theodore Walsh pushed through the crowd and shook Robert's hand. "Thank you. I never thought I'd see justice for what they did to us." Patricia Huang was crying happy tears. "Can we get our money back?" "Is that possible?" Vanessa answered that one. "There will likely be restitution as part of any plea deal or court judgment. We'll be working with all the victims to document their losses. It's going to take time, but yes, you should be able to recover at least some of what you lost." Dave pulled Robert aside. "Nice work. You handed us a complete case on a silver platter. The DA is going to love this." "How much trouble are they in?" Robert asked. "Real trouble. With the embezzlement, fraud, and multiple victims. Linda's looking at 3 to 5 years minimum, probably more. Ronald might get a similar sentence. They're going to lose everything. The business, probably their house, to pay restitution. They're done." Robert nodded slowly. He didn't feel triumphant exactly. Just tired, and maybe a little satisfied that people who'd hurt so many families were finally going to face consequences. Frank approached him. "Robert, on behalf of the board, I want to apologize. We should have been paying closer attention. And obviously all those violation charges against you are dropped. Your sale can proceed without any HOA interference." "Thanks, Frank. Also," Frank continued, "we're going to need a new president, someone trustworthy who actually cares about this community. I don't suppose you'd be interested?" Robert laughed. "I'm selling my house, remember? Moving to the beach. But I appreciate the offer. As the crowd finally started to disperse, Robert stood in the empty community center and looked around. A week ago, he just wanted to sell his house and retire. Now he'd taken down an entire criminal operation. Not a bad final case before retirement, he thought. Not bad at all. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. Robert's phone rang constantly with reporters wanting the story, neighbors thanking him, and lawyers asking for his testimony. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly the whole city was talking about the HOA president, who'd been running a real estate scam for years. But Robert wasn't interested in being famous. He just wanted to close on his house and get to the beach. Michelle called him Friday morning, her voice practically singing. "Robert, the buyers are back in." They saw the news and called me last night. They said, and I quote, "If Detective Chen says the house is good, then it's good. We can close next Friday as originally planned." Robert felt a weight lift off his shoulders. "That's great news, Michelle. Thank you for sticking with me through all this." "Are you kidding? This is the most exciting sale I've ever handled. I'm putting it in my marketing materials. Michelle Torres, real estate agent who doesn't back down from corrupt HOAs." Robert laughed. After she hung up, he sat on his back porch with a cup of coffee and just breathed. He'd done it. The house would sell. He could move on, but first there was still work to be done. The following Tuesday, Robert attended a meeting at the district attorney's office. Dave was there, along with Vanessa from the Real Estate Commission, 2 prosecutors, and several of the victims, including Theodore Walsh and Patricia Huang. The lead prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman named Karen Rodriguez, laid out the case. "We've got them cold. The evidence Detective Chen compiled, combined with the financial records and victim testimonies, gives us multiple felony counts. Real estate fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, extortion. Linda and Ronald Prescott are looking at serious prison time." "How much time?" Theodore asked. "Because I want to make sure they actually pay for what they did." With all the charges together, Linda could get 5 to 7 years. Ronald is looking at similar numbers. They've both lawyered up, and honestly, their attorneys are already talking about a plea deal. They know they can't win at trial. Patricia raised her hand slightly. "What about our money? Can we get it back?" Karen nodded. "Restitution will be part of any plea agreement. We're documenting every victim's losses. The Prescotts will have to liquidate assets to pay you back. Their house, their cars, the business assets. It won't happen overnight, but you'll see money eventually. Probably 70 to 80 cents on the dollar when all is said and done." It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Robert could see the relief on the victims' faces. They'd thought their money was gone forever. Now there was hope. "What about the HOA funds they stole?" another victim asked. A younger woman named Jennifer, who'd been quiet until now. "That gets returned to the HOA, Karen explained, "which means it goes back into your community fund. You'll all benefit from that indirectly through improved services and possibly reduced dues." After the meeting, Theodore pulled Robert aside. "I never got to properly thank you. What you did, investigating all of this while dealing with your own problems, that took guts and skill. My wife and I, we were so depressed after losing that money. We thought we'd never see justice. You gave us that." Robert shook his hand. "I just did what any cop would do. Saw something wrong and tried to fix it." "No," Theodore said firmly. "Most people would have just paid the fines or sold cheap to make the problem go away. You fought back. That's not just any cop. That's a good person." The words stuck with Robert as he drove home. He'd spent his whole career catching bad guys, but he didn't always get to see the impact on the victims. This time he had. This time he'd actually helped people get their lives back on track. 3 weeks later, Robert stood in an attorney's office and signed the final closing documents for his house. The young couple who'd bought it were there with their real estate agent, practically bouncing with excitement. The wife was showing already, her hand resting on her belly. "We're so grateful," she said to Robert. "When all that HOA drama started, we were terrified. But then you fixed everything. Our babies are going to grow up in that backyard because of you." Robert felt his throat get tight. "You're going to love that house. It's got good bones, lots of happy memories there. I hope you make plenty of your own." After the signing, Robert drove to his old house one last time. The moving truck had taken everything the day before, but he wanted to say goodbye properly. He walked through the empty rooms, his footsteps echoing. This was where his kids had grown up, where he'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, where his wife had lived before cancer took her. It was hard to leave, but it was time. His phone buzzed. A text from Dave. It's official. Linda pled guilty to all charges. 6 years. Ronald got 5. Sentencing next month. Robert texted back. Good. Another text came in, this one from Frank, the HOA board member. Community meeting tonight if you want to come. We're voting in a new president and celebrating the recovery of the stolen funds. Would love to see you there. Robert thought about it, then decided why not. One last neighborhood event before he left for good. The community center was packed again, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. People were smiling, laughing, eating cookies from a folding table by the door. Kids were running around playing tag. It felt like a block party. Frank called the meeting to order and gave an update. The state had frozen all of the Prescott's assets. The HOA would be getting back about $75,000 of the embezzled money. The victims would be getting restitution payments starting in about 6 months. We're also implementing new rules, Frank announced. All HOA expenses over $500 now require a full board vote with documented justification. We're hiring an independent accountant to review our books quarterly, and we're limiting what violations can actually be enforced to only what's in our original bylaws. No more made-up rules, the crowd applauded. Then Helen, the other board member, stood up. We also want to formally recognize someone who saved this community from years more of Linda Prescott's corruption. Robert Chen couldn't be here tonight. Oh wait, yes he can. The crowd turned, and Robert realized Helen had spotted him standing in the back. Everyone started clapping. It grew into a standing ovation that made Robert deeply uncomfortable. He wasn't good with attention. George pushed through the crowd and handed him a plaque. From the Meadowbrook community in appreciation for your service and dedication. You didn't just save your own house sale. You saved all of us. Robert looked at the plaque. It had his name engraved on it and everything. Thanks, he managed. I just want to say, this community is lucky to have people like Frank and Helen and George who care enough to make sure things are done right. They're the ones who'll keep this place great. More applause. Robert stayed for another hour, accepting thanks from neighbors, eating cookies, watching kids play. It felt good, like closure. As he was leaving, Patricia Huang stopped him at the door. I heard you're moving to the beach. Whereabouts? Little town about 2 hours north. Right on the water. Small place, quiet, just what I need after 30 years of crime and chaos. Sounds perfect. Well, if you ever need anything, you let me know. You've got friends here, even if you don't live here anymore. Robert drove away from Meadowbrook for the last time as the sun was setting. In his rearview mirror, he could see the community center lights, people still celebrating inside. He'd come into this neighborhood 15 years ago as a young detective with a growing family. He was leaving as a man ready to retire, alone but not lonely, and with the satisfaction of knowing his last case had been a good one. The condo near the beach was small, but perfect. 1 bedroom, a little balcony overlooking the ocean, enough room for him and maybe a dog. Robert spent his first morning there, sitting on the balcony with coffee, watching the waves roll in. His phone buzzed. A news alert. Former HOA President Linda Prescott sentenced to 6 years in prison for real estate fraud scheme. Robert read the article. The judge had been harsh in sentencing, calling the crime a betrayal of community trust for personal greed. Ronald got 5 years. They'd also been ordered to pay back every penny they'd stolen, plus damages. Justice served. Robert deleted the alert and put his phone down. That chapter was closed. Time for a new one. He'd spent his whole career putting bad people away and helping victims find justice. Now it was time to help himself find peace. A seagull landed on his balcony railing, eyeing his coffee cup hopefully. Robert laughed. Sorry, buddy, no food yet. But give me time to get settled and I'll make sure to have some snacks around. The seagull cawed and flew away. Robert watched it soar over the ocean, free and unburdened. Yeah,